After performing the shared preferences, Android provides us something called as preference activities. Until now, we have just seen one type of activity, that is a normal activity. Preference activities are another type of activity which is used only to save the data for preferences. Okay, first of all, let's understand the need of preference activities. Suppose in your application you have 10 preferences. Okay, so you have to make a layout to save all those 10 preferences. Then you have to use a shared preferences dot editor to save all those 10 preferences. Then you have to load all the 10 preferences in your code. This complete procedure is very long and is very repetitive. Okay, to avoid this procedure, Android provides you with preference activities. Preference activities take care of saving data and loading data for you automatically, so you don't have to write any code for it. You have to just have an XML file. That XML file will contain all the preferences. Those preferences save and fetch will be done directly by the Android OS. Okay, so you don't have to do anything in terms of code. You have to just create a new activity and set the layout of that activity as the preference activity layout. So let's do it in actual practice. Android supports one more type of activity called as preference activity, which is used only to save preferences of user. These activities do not require any code to save the preferences into memory. The code is automatically generated for us by the Android OS. This type of activity is used in almost all projects of Android where preferences are required to be stored. Let's take an example of Angry Birds. I hope you have seen the application Angry Birds. Whenever you set the volume, whenever you set the music volume of the application, that screen that you get it in front of you is the screen of the preference activities. So let's see how do we use preference activities in our code. Each preference activity should have a different XML file. Now, as a glitch over here, all preference activities file are stored inside the res/xml folder. Okay, preference activities file are not stored inside res/layout folder. They are stored inside res/xml folder, and the base element of this type of activity or of this type of XML file is preference screen. For example, in case of menus, the base element was menu. In case of layouts, the base element was linear layout, relative layout, etc. In case of preference activities, the base element is preference screen. To create a preference activity, we should follow the given steps. Step 1 is that we have to create an XML file of type preference screen. So the XML file should be of type preference screen. Second, we have to add preferences inside this file. Third, we have to create a Java class for this preference activity and extend it from the preference activity class. Normal activity classes are extended by activity class. This type of class will be extended with the help of preference activity class. Then call this preference activity class from our Java code. It's very easy. With the help of intents, we'll do this. Then add the activity name to the manifest file. This is required because preference activity is nothing but an activity at its core. So you have to add the activity name inside the Android manifest.xml file. And to read the preferences, we have to use the preference manager.get default shared preferences function. We'll do this thing in actual practice so that you get a complete hang of it. Let's create a new project with the name preference activity demo. Inside the res/xml folder, we have to create a new XML file with the name preferences.xml. Normally, you will not get a folder named XML inside your res folder. You have to add a new folder with the name XML and add a new file inside that with the name preferences.xml. So we have given the file name as preferences.xml, as you can see over here, and we have chosen the root element of this to be preference screen. Okay. Once we are done, then let's add the preferences in the XML file. To add the preferences in the XML file, you should add the following code. we have to add the first preference as an edit text preference with the key base level and the title as enter base and the summary as use this option to set the base level. Okay, so we have three properties over here. The first property is the key that we want over there. Each preference is stored in the form of key value pairs. So in our case, the key is base level. The title of this is enter base. That is the title which will be like appearing at the top of the preference activity. And the summary is use this option to set the base level. This is for the first preference. This preference is of type edit text. So we have edit text preference. Let's add the second preference of type checkbox preference and the key to be mute. Okay, a checkbox preference will have a value true or false. So we'll have the key as mute over here. And the title of this preference is mute sound and summary is this option mutes the sound. So in our case, we have two preferences. The first preference is an edit text preference with the key base level, the title enter base, and the summary as use this option to set the base level. The second preference is a checkbox preference that can hold only true or false. The key of it is mute, the title is mute sound, and summary is this option mutes the sound. I hope we are clear with this. With this knowledge, let's move ahead and write the Java code for it. So we'll add a Java file with the name preferences and we'll say public class preferences extends preference activity. This is not a normal activity, it is a preference activity. So we say public class preferences extends preference activity. We'll say on create. Inside on create we'll have super.onCreate and we have to just call one function called as add preferences from resource. Okay, we will not call set content view over here. We'll call add preferences from resource. This function makes sure that whatever preferences you have defined inside your XML file will be imported over here and the code for reading and writing those preferences will be added automatically. So you don't have to write any code to read or write the preferences. When you call this function add preferences from resource, this function does the job of giving you the code for reading and writing the preferences in the XML file. That was the code for the preferences. Now let's add the code for the main activity. Okay, we have the activity main.xml file and inside the onCreate method, we have super.onCreate, we have set content view. Let's get the reference of the button by saying btn launch preferences equals to button, find view by ID. That's very obvious now. Inside the onClick listener, we will use an intent, int preference equals to new intent, and we'll pass the name of the activity.this, comma, the activity which we want to call. We want to call the preferences activity, so we'll say preferences.class and we'll say start activity int preference. So it will actually start the preference activity for us and there we have two preferences, the base level and the mute. Okay. Over here we have written the onCreate method. The onCreate method will be called whenever the activity is created. Okay. So suppose you click on launch preferences. After clicking on launching preferences, the preference activity will be called. Inside the preference activity, you set some preferences and you press the back button. As soon as you press the back button, the activity of preference will go out of focus and the main activity will come in focus. Okay, let me reiterate that. Whenever you will click on launch preferences, the second activity will be called. Inside this activity, you will be changing the preferences. When you click on back, the activity of preferences will be going out of focus and this main activity will be coming in focus. That means the focus of the main activity is being changed. Correct? So whenever the focus of the activity is being changed, at that time, if the activity is in focus, then you will load all the preferences and show it to the user with the help of a toast. So to do that, we have something called as, let's first add the permission to the manifest file. That's fine, we add the permission. Now, to read the save preferences, we have to first assume that the preferences will be read as soon as the user exits from the preference activity. That is, whenever we click on launch preferences, the second activity will be called, and inside the second activity, we will change the preferences and press the back button. So whenever the user exits from the preference activity, we have to read the preferences. Once the preference activity is exited, the main activity is shown. Inside the main activity, we have to read the preferences as soon as the main activity has got focus. Okay, this is done by overriding the on window focus changed function. There's a function called as on window focus changed. This function has to be written by us. Whenever we write this function, if the window has got focused, then whatever you want to do, you can do inside this function. Okay, this is also one of the life cycle methods of the activity. We have seen on create method, we have seen on create options menu method, we have seen on create context method, we have seen on options item selected method, we have seen on context item selected method, and now we have on window focus change method. So let's say public void on window focus changed. You don't have to type this complete thing. You will say on window control space. This function will come automatically. Inside this, we have to say if has focus is true, then you have to read the preferences from the preference activity. To read the preferences, as we had seen in the slide of steps for doing this preference activity, we had preference manager.get default shared preferences. This, the meaning of this is the current application. So we will say preference manager.get default shared preferences. We'll get the reference of this preference manager inside the shared preferences object, prefs. Inside the prefs object, we'll say pref.getString. We'll pass the key over here. This key was defined in the XML file as base level, and we'll keep the default value as 0. Similarly, we'll have a muted variable that was boolean. So we'll say pref.getBoolean mute, false. This false and 0 are the default values of the preferences. Let's toast them. So we'll say toast.makeText, sound mute is muted, and base level is base. So if the sound was muted, you will get sound mute true. If the base level was 7 dB, you will get base level as 7 dB. I hope we are clear with this. So once we are done with the code, let's do it in actual practice and see how do we get the output of it. So let's do it for the preference screen that we had just studied. Before that, let me close everything that I have over here. This was the old application of shared preferences. Let me right click and close the application. Let's go to file and say new Android application project and give the application as preference screen demo. Let me give the package name as com.fitech. Let me give the build SDK of this as Android 2.3.1. Say next, next, and your title as preference screen demo. So far so good. Now we have to add a new XML folder inside RES. So right click on RES and say new folder. Give the name of the folder as XML. Inside RES, we have to add a folder named XML. Inside this folder, we have to add a new Android XML file, and the XML type of the resource is preference and should be preference screen. Okay, the resource type is a preference and the root element is preference screen. Let's give the file name as preference demo and press finish. It will give me all the XML file over here. It gives the structure over here. Let me click on the XML to get the XML of it. Inside the preference screen, we have to add the edit text preference first. So I'll get edit text preference. The edit text preference has some property. One of the properties is key. So let me give Android :key. The key of this is say base level. The second property is title. Let me give title of this to be enter base level, and the summary of this to be this option helps you to set the base level of the system. Let's add one more property to say checkbox property or checkbox preference. The key of the checkbox preference should be muted and title should be mutes the sound and summary should be, we have a summary over here. This option mutes the system sound. You have two more options over here inside summary. The first option says summary on and the second option says summary off, as you have seen over here. The summary on option is used whenever you have check marked on the checkbox preference, and when you have checked off of the checkbox preference you get summary off. You can play with it in your home assignment, that's not a problem. Then let's add, we have added the XML of it inside the XML folder. Let's add one button to the main activity which will launch this XML. So I'll just remove the hello world from here, change the layout to linear layout, add a button, right click and say layout with match parent, and change the ID of the button to btn launch preferences, and let me change the text of this, show the preference screen. Okay, when someone clicks on this, the preference screen will be shown, else the normal screen will be shown. Go to main activity and over here let's get the reference of the control. Final button btn launch equals to button find view by id r.id dot btn launch preferences. Then we can say btn launch preferences dot set on click listener new on click listener. Let me import the on click listener over here and then create an intent int. I'll say int pref equals to new intent. Let me give the package name or the context of this as main activity.this. The second class has not yet been created, but let's assume that we will give the class name as preferenceDemo.class. This will give me an error because we don't have the preferenceDemo class yet. Let's say start activity int pref. Okay. Now let's add the preferenceDemo class. Let's copy the name over here. Right click, new class. Give the class name as preferenceDemo. Finish. As you can see, the error has gone away because now we have the preferenceDemo class available. The base class of the preferenceDemo class will not be simple activity. It will be preference activity. Okay. Inside on create, we have super.onCreate, and we want over here add preferences from resource. The preferences should be added from which resource? r.xml.preferenceDemo, because we want all the preferences to be loaded from the preferenceDemo XML file, which is present inside res/xml/preferencedemo.xml. So we will access it by saying r, that is our resource, .xml, that is this folder of XML, .preferencedemo, this is this file. That's it for the preferencedemo activity. We now have to override a function called as onWindow focus changed. As you can see, if you just give onw control space, it will give you onWindow focus changed. Over here, just say if has focus is double equal to true. That indicates the window has got focus. So we'll load the preferences first. So I'll just shared preferences sp preference manager dot get default shared preferences. It asks for the context. The context should be main activity dot this, because this is the context from which I want to load the preferences. Now store them in local variables. So we can say string base equals to sp dot get string. The key for the base level was base underscore level. As you can see over here, this key has to be matching with this key, and default value should be say 0 dB, and let me say boolean muted equals to sp dot get boolean. The key for the boolean was muted. You just copy this key from here and paste it over here, and default value is say false. Then you can just toast it, toast dot, we have toast dot make text. The first argument is the context, so you can either give get application context or you can say main activity dot this, whatever suits you, that's not a problem. Let's give the text on this to be base level is say plus base plus say slash n mute, and just give a plus muted, and let's give duration to be toast dot length long so that we'll be able to see it dot show. Okay, so far so good. So we have created a preference demo.xml file inside the XML folder. Inside this XML folder, inside the preference demo.xml file, we have two preferences. One is the edit text preference and the other is the checkbox preference. The edit text preference has the key as base level, and the checkbox preference has the key as muted. Whenever someone clicks on the button of launch, the intent for the preference demo will be called. The preference demo intent will actually add the preference resources from the r.xml or preference demo file into the layout. We can change those preferences. As soon as we change and press back, the on window focus change will be called. If our window has got focus, then we'll load all the preferences and toast it at the output to the user. First of all, let me ask you, will this application work? As of now, this application will not work because you haven't added the reference of the activity in the manifest file. So double click on the manifest file, go to the XML of it, and over here give activity Android name equals to dot, what is the activity name? Preference demo. Let's give the Android title or Android label to be preferences demo, and just close this activity tag. Now the application is fully functional. You can straight away run it as an Android application on the device, and you'll be able to see that the application works perfectly fine. Okay, let's start it by saying show preference screen. As you can see, this layout is not made by us. This layout has been done by the Android OS itself. We have just given a preference demo.xml file. The first title was enter base level, and the summary was this option helps you to set the base level of the system. Click on it. You'll be able to set the base level in an edit text. Let me give it 25 say decibels. Okay, let's press OK. It will save it. I'll say mute the sound. So we don't have to press save anywhere. Just click on back. As you can see, base level 25 dB, mute true. These preferences have been saved forever. If you want, you can have a look on that. You have preference screen demo. As you can see, base level 25, mute true. Because this window was in focus, it got to that function and it gave you the toast. Go to show preference screen again. You can change the base level over here from 25 dB to say 45 dB. Say OK and press back again. You'll be able to get the preferences as you had changed. Let me remove the mute option again and press back. You'll be able to get it is following your proper commands.